There have been discussions about whether humans could inhabit Venus. It's not really that practical, but can you also imagine having a really long day? And plus you'd have, if you celebrated your birthday on like day 1 of a Venus year, you'd celebrate your birthday within the same day and the same year. So there you go. Right, so that's all mixed in, looking lovely. That needs to go back on the hob of your simmering water and heat through. I keep on stirring, but effectively a curd is a custard mixture, so we're going to slowly heat this up. You don't want to heat it up too quickly now you've got the egg yolks in there, and keep on stirring it so you don't get lumps. If you do get lumps in the mixture, just get a sieve and pour it through the sieve, and then you can remove some of your lumps. I've taken the curd mixture off the heat just for a moment. It's starting to thicken up. You can see it's starting to get nice and sticky as well with the sugar. I've kept the whisk in just to help stop with the lumps, but if you get a spoon you can start to see it should start to coat and drip off slowly. So that's it starting to thicken up. And the last stage that we're going to do is just add the butter, and this is going to make it really glossy and yummy. I've used salted butter. Some people use unsalted butter and then add some salt. I've just killed 2 birds with 1 stone. There, I've cubed the butter, so when you start mixing it in, it should melt quite quickly. Just whisk it and then put this back on the heat and keep on heating it through until it's thickened and ready to go in the pie. Also have a quick taste of it. If you think it needs a bit more acidity, then add a little bit of lemon juice in. If you think it needs a bit more sugar, you can add a little bit more sugar in if you want. It's quite difficult to know because you don't want the curd to just taste perfect by itself. When you eat it together with the meringue will add the sweetness, so I wouldn't recommend adding too much sugar in at this moment in time. It's also the perfect colour as well. I love this orangey colour. I think it really represents Venus really well. Okay, so I'm going to pop that back on the hob, turn it up a little bit, and keep whisking it, and then I'm going to go make the meringue. This step of the recipe requires a little bit of timing because you do not want to make your meringue too soon before your curd is ready and your oven is at the right temperature to cook it. So what I've done is I've got everything out ready. I've measured out my sugar, my cream of tartar, my egg whites are in the bowl. I've just waited a little while. My curd is now done, it's thick enough. I've left it on the hob above the hot water because I want to keep it warm when we put the meringue on it. So sometimes with meringue pies they can weep a little bit if you've ever tried making them before, and that's just it's a bit of water separation between the curd and the meringue layer. And if you put your meringue on the curd on the pie whilst the curd is still hot, it kind of cooks the meringue a little bit in that surface boundary and prevents that weepage. So I just had a little bit of a break, had something to eat, cleaned up a little bit and waited for my curd to thicken up, and then I'm ready for the next step. So I've got as I said, I've got my egg whites in my bowl here. I'm going to put in half a teaspoon of cream of tartar straight away, and then I'm just going to turn it on. Now I've never done this before, so I'm hoping that you can still hear me over the food mixer, but if not, I'll try and put subtitles on the video as well, so you can understand the process and what we're doing. I'm going to turn this up quite high. And start mixing it. We're getting air bubbles into our egg whites to make this perfect cloudy meringue. Cloudy being the operative word because this is why I've chosen this recipe. So whilst I slowly add the sugar, I'll explain to you a bit more about that. So what you need to do is just add the sugar a tablespoon at a time. Don't add it too fast. Wait for the tablespoon to mix in and then add the next one in. So going back to why I've chosen this recipe, Venus has a really thick atmosphere. It's 96% carbon dioxide. It's so thick that we can't actually see the surface of Venus using visible light. So we can see the surface of Mars, we can see the surface of Mercury, we can see the surface of Pluto, there aren't any surfaces to see of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, and we can see the cloud patterns. But Venus's atmosphere is so thick that we can't see it, so the pictures that we do see of Venus's surfaces are using other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum to see through those clouds. Almost done there. So I kind of thought that this was the perfect recipe to make because the meringue represents that cloud layer and then the orangey curd underneath represents the surface. Venus is volcanically active. It's more volcanoes on Venus than there are on Earth. It's not all lava flows though, so there's rocky surfaces as well and things. So I have to admit, I think in my head I just always had Venus as this sort of really volcanic, covered in lava, like bubbling pools of lava. But after doing a bit more research for this recipe, I found that it isn't actually that at all. Our meringue, it's almost thickening up and almost ready, and as I add the last bits of the sugar as well. And finally, my last fact about Venus for now is that the cloud layer is so thick that if you were to stand on the surface of Venus, it's 92 times the atmospheric pressure that we experience on Earth. So that's, if you stand at sea level on Earth, that's 1 atmospheric pressure. There isn't a sea or an ocean on Venus, but it's 92 times that amount that we would experience if we're at sea level. So that's the equivalent of being about 900 metres under the sea. So imagine the amount of weight, the atmospheric pressure. That was underestimated by the engineers that built some of the probes that have gone through the atmosphere of Venus. So it's very difficult to build robots and satellites to withstand that amount of atmospheric pressure. But anyway, my cool facts about Venus, there we go. Right, so I'm just going to leave that to whisk for 1 more minute. And then I'm going to turn it off. I'll get everything set up and we'll finish making our meringue pie. Right, we're now ready to put all of the parts together for our pie. I've put my machine away, that was really noisy, so hopefully you can hear me better now. Your meringue you needed to whisk up into stiff peaks, and what that means is when you lift it up into peaks, they stay up in peaks like that. It also looks really glossy and beautiful in the light, and if you want to try this technique, if you lift it above your head and it doesn't fall out of the bowl, then your meringue is perfect. And how wrong would that have been if it had actually fallen out of the bowl? So anyway, there we go. So we've got our meringue already, we've got our curd which is still quite warm in the bowl here, and we've got the pie dish ready. So what you need to do is just simply pour your curd into the pie. Always scrape the bowl, but then there is a fun part, you can lick the bowl out afterwards as well if you want to. just wobble it around a little bit and make sure that it's all level. And then you can get your spatula and start to put the meringue on. Now, there is a little bit of a cloud pattern in some of the pictures that I've seen from NASA's website, and I was going to try and sort of recreate that. But to begin with, I'm just going to carefully put the meringue on top of the pie. Because the curd's quite liquid, you don't want to slosh it around too much. So just carefully place your meringue on top. Fun facts. So we do think that there may have been water on Venus, maybe in the like in oceans and things like we have on Earth, but that water would have boiled away. As I said earlier, Venus is the hottest planet in our solar system, so that water would have just vaporized away and been lost to the solar system. It will be no longer on Venus. So whether it's possible that life once existed on Venus, it may have been a possibility, but whether there's any life there now, we're not sure. The first satellite to go to Venus was Mariner 2, and that was in 1962. Quite impressive. The Russians, though, were the first to land probe and take pictures of the surface. And that's where you can see some of the rocky surfaces on Venus. Right, so the cloud patterns, I'll try and show you, they're sort of straight like this in the top, and then they're straight like this in the bottom. You know what? Let's spike it up. And then they have these sort of triangular sort of chevron patterns around the equator. So try and put those in as well. Right, so I like my meringue on the top of my meringue pies quite crispy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook this at 140 degrees C for about 45 to 50 minutes. And that should be a low enough temperature to cook the meringue through, but also then long enough so the top goes crispy and a little bit brown, but the inside of the meringue will stay gooey as well.